The wagon rattled through killing cold, and something was dying underneath the canvas. Caleb Rourke didn't believe in mercy anymore, not after what the world had taught him. But when he heard that sound, that broken gasp in the darkness, everything he'd built to keep himself safe started to crack. She shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have stopped. And what came next would pull them both into a storm that had nothing to do with snow and everything to do with the dangerous thing growing between two people who'd sworn never to need anyone again. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The cold didn't ask permission. It just took. Caleb felt it through his worn coat, through the leather gloves he'd patched 3 times already, through the scarf wrapped tight, enough to leave marks. February in the Montana Territory wasn't a season. It was a test, one you either passed or died failing. His wagon groaned beneath him, wood and iron protesting every frozen rut in what passed for a road. 17 miles from town. 17 miles of white nothing stretching in every direction until the world just stopped existing. His mare, a tough sorrel named Greta, blew clouds of steam into air so cold it could snap bone. He'd made this run 100 times. Supplies, basics. Just enough to keep himself going another month in the cabin he'd built with his own scarred hands. No neighbors within 10 miles, no visitors, no complications. That was the deal he'd made with himself 3 years ago when he'd left everything behind. The sun was dying somewhere behind the thick gray sky when he heard it. At first he thought it was the wind. Montana wind could sound like anything, screaming, crying, laughing. It played tricks. But this sound came again, muffled, human, coming from behind him, from under the canvas covering his supplies. Caleb's hand moved to the rifle resting against his leg before his brain caught up. He didn't slow the wagon, didn't turn his head, just listened, counting heartbeats, weighing possibilities. Could be a kid from town playing stupid games. Could be someone hurt. Could be someone waiting to put a knife in him the second he showed weakness. Trust was a luxury he'd stopped affording. The sound came a third time, weaker, a wet, desperate gasp that made something twist in his chest despite everything. Damn it! He pulled Greta to a halt. The silence that followed was enormous, broken only by the creak of leather and the horse's breathing. Caleb sat perfectly still, listening to the wilderness. This was predator country, wolf country, and men could be worse than either. Nothing moved in the gathering dark except snow devils dancing across the open land. He set the rifle across his knees, wrapped the reins around the brake handle, and turned. The canvas covering his flour, salt, and coffee was pulled tight, lashed down with rope he tied himself that morning. But something was wrong with the shape of it, a bulk that shouldn't be there. "I've got a gun," he said, voice flat, "and I know how to use it." No answer, just that sound again, ragged breathing, barely there. Caleb climbed back slowly, boots careful on the frozen wagon bed. His fingers worked the rope, ice crystals breaking away from the knots. When he pulled the canvas back, the last gray light of day showed him what was underneath. A woman. She was curled tight between sacks of grain, so thin he could see the shape of her skull beneath skin gone gray with cold. Her clothes were wrong, too light, city clothes, a dress that might have been blue once but was mostly just dirt and blood now. No coat, no gloves. Her hands were pulled up against her chest, fingers twisted into claws. She wasn't dead yet, but she was close enough to see it from where she lay. Jesus Christ! The words came out before he could stop them. Her eyes opened, just barely. They were dark, fever bright, fixed on his face with an intensity that made him step back. She tried to speak, lips cracking, but nothing came out except a sound like paper tearing. Every instinct Caleb had built screamed at him to cover her back up, keep driving, let the wilderness take care of its own business. He didn't know this woman, didn't owe her anything. Getting involved meant questions, complications, the exact kind of trouble he'd buried himself out here to avoid. Her hand moved, just an inch, reaching for nothing. "Damn it!" he said again. He grabbed the blanket he kept behind the seat, the thick wool one that had seen him through worse storms than this. She didn't fight when he wrapped her in it. Didn't make a sound. Just let him lift her. She weighed nothing, less than the sacks of flour, and carry her to the front of the wagon. She slumped against him when he set her on the bench, head falling against his shoulder. He could feel her breathing, shallow and wrong, feel the cold coming off her like she'd swallowed winter whole. Caleb shook the reins hard. "Come on, girl. Home. Fast." Greta knew that tone. She leaned into the harness, and the wagon lurched forward into the dying light. The cabin sat in a small valley, backed against a stand of pine that broke the worst of the wind. Caleb had chosen the spot carefully, close to water, sheltered, defensible. He'd built it alone, every log, every nail, working through summer heat and fall rain until he had something solid, something that was his and nobody else's. He never thought he'd bring another person here. The woman hadn't moved since he'd pulled her up front. She breathed sometimes, made small sounds that could have been words or just air escaping. Her head stayed against his shoulder, and he didn't push her away. Stars were showing through breaks in the clouds by the time he reached the cabin. He worked fast, muscle memory taking over. Unhitched Greta led her into the small barn, made sure she had feed and water. The whole time, part of his mind stayed on the woman in the wagon, calculating how long she had, what he'd need to do. He didn't let himself think about why he was doing it at all. When he carried her inside, the cabin was dark and cold. He'd banked the fire before leaving that morning, and now just embers glowed in the stone hearth. He laid her on his bed, the only bed, and lit the oil lamp with stiff fingers. In the lamplight, she looked worse. Her face was a map of suffering, bruised, split lip, hollowed cheeks. There was old blood in her hair, matted and frozen. Her dress was torn in places, showing pale skin mottled with cold and something else. Something that made his jaw tight. "What happened to you?" he asked the silent room. She couldn't answer, maybe wouldn't, even if she could. Caleb built up the fire until it roared, throwing heat that would take time to reach the far corners of the cabin. He heated water in the pot that hung from the iron hook, filled a bowl, grabbed clean rags from the chest at the foot of his bed. Then he stopped. He'd been in fights, patched himself up more times than he could count. But this was different. This was a woman, unconscious, helpless. Every instinct said to help. Every rule said to be careful. "I'm just trying to help," he said out loud, like she could hear him, like it mattered. He cleaned her face first, gentle as he could manage with hands better suited to splitting wood. The blood came away slowly, revealing scrapes and bruises underneath. Her lip was split deep. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut. Someone had done this. Recently. Her hands were worse. The fingers were white and waxy, frostbite starting to set in. He worked them carefully, one at a time, warming them gradually. She made a sound when he touched her left hand, a sharp intake of breath that meant pain. "I know," he said quietly. "I know it hurts." It took him an hour to get her clean enough, warm enough, stable enough that he thought she might make it through the night. He wrapped her hands in clean cloth, checked her breathing every few minutes, added more blankets when she started shaking. The shaking was good. It meant her body was trying to fight. He sat in the chair he'd made from pine and rawhide, watching her as the fire cracked and settled. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Weather coming in. He could feel it in the air, taste it like metal. Who was she? Where had she come from? How had she ended up in his wagon, dying 17 miles from anything? The questions circled like wolves, but he had no answers. Around midnight, she opened her eyes. He saw it in the lamplight, the sudden awareness, the fear flooding in. She tried to sit up, failed, tried again. Her hands pushed against the blankets, tangling. "Easy." Caleb stayed in his chair, kept his voice low. "You're safe. You're in my cabin. You were freezing to death." She stared at him. Her eyes tracked across his face, down to his hands resting on his knees, back up, calculating, measuring threat. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. She didn't relax. Smart woman. "Can you talk?" Her mouth moved. Nothing came out at first. She swallowed, winced, tried again. "Water." Her voice was wrecked, barely a whisper, but it was there. Caleb stood slowly, filled a cup from the bucket by the door. When he brought it to her, she flinched back. "It's just water." She watched him for a long moment. Then she took the cup with shaking hands and drank. Most of it spilled down her chin, but some made it down. She coughed, sucked in air, drank again. "Easy," he said. "Not too fast." She ignored him, draining the cup, holding it out for more. He refilled it twice before she finally stopped, falling back against the pillows with a sound that was half relief, half pain. "What's your name?" he asked. She closed her eyes. "Where did you come from?" "Nothing." "Who hurt you?" Her jaw tightened. That was an answer in itself. Caleb sat back down, giving her space. "You don't have to talk, but I need to know if someone's coming after you, if I need to be ready." Her eyes opened again, fixing on him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "No one's coming," she said, each word costing her. "No one knows I'm here?" "How did you get in my wagon?" "I climbed in town, when you were loading." "That was 4 hours ago. You've been under that canvas for 4 hours in this cold?" She didn't answer, didn't need to. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," Caleb said flatly. "You should be dead." "I know." The way she said it made him stop, like death would have been fine, like it was what she expected. "Well, you're not dead," he said after a moment. "So now what?" "I don't know." At least she was honest. He stood, moved to the stove, started pulling together something that could pass for food. Beans, dried meat, bread he'd baked 3 days ago. Nothing fancy, but it was warm and it was calories. "What's your name?" he asked again, not looking at her. A long silence. Then, "Ilara." "Ilara what?" "Just Ilara." Fine. He could respect that. "I'm Caleb Rourke. This is my cabin, my land." "You're about 18 miles from the nearest town, and there's a storm coming that's going to bury us for at least 3 days. He stirred the pot, watching steam rise. "When it passes, if you can walk, I'll take you wherever you want to go. Until then, you stay here. You follow my rules. You don't touch my things. We understand each other?" "Yes." "Good." He dished up the food, brought her a bowl. She took it with both hands, moving slowly, everything hurting. She ate like someone who hadn't seen food in days, barely chewing, just shoveling it in until the bowl was empty. "There's more," he said. She shook her head. "I'll be sick." Probably right. He took the bowl back, cleaned it, put it away. The routine of simple tasks helped, gave him something to do with his hands while his mind tried to sort through what he'd just done. He'd brought a stranger into his home, a woman running from something bad enough to risk death rather than face it. Every piece of sense he had said this was a mistake, but he'd made his choice when he'd pulled back that canvas. "You can have the bed," he said. "I'll sleep in the chair." "No." Her voice was stronger now, fed and warmed. "I can't take your bed." "You're half frozen and beat to hell. You're taking the bed." This isn't a discussion." She looked at him for a long moment, something working behind her eyes. Then she nodded, sinking back into the blankets. Caleb added more wood to the fire, checked the shutters, made sure everything was secure. The wind was really howling now, and the first pelts of snow hit the roof like thrown stones. The storm was here. He settled into his chair, pulling a blanket over his legs. The cabin was one room, maybe 20 feet across. The bed was against the far wall, the hearth in the center, his table and chairs near the door. His things, his tools, his books, his life, arranged with the precision of someone who'd had to pack and move too many times. Ilara's breathing evened out as she slipped back into sleep. Caleb watched the fire, listening to the storm build outside, and wondered what in hell he'd just brought down on himself. The next 3 days blurred together in a rhythm of survival. The storm hit hard, turning the world outside into a white roar that never stopped. Snow piled against the cabin walls, covered the windows, buried everything. Caleb had seen bad winters, but this was something else. This was the kind of storm that killed people who weren't prepared. Good thing he was always prepared. He kept the fire going, rationed the wood, melted snow for water. Ilara slept most of the first 2 days, her body shutting down to heal. When she was awake, she didn't talk much. Just watched him move around the cabin with those dark, measuring eyes. He didn't push. Everyone had secrets. His were just buried deeper than most. On the 3rd morning, she spoke first. "You live here alone?" Caleb was at the stove, making coffee from grounds he'd already used twice. "Yes." "By choice? Is there another way?" She almost smiled at that. Almost. Most people need other people. I'm not most people. I noticed. He poured 2 cups of the weak coffee, brought her one. Her hands were better. The frostbite hadn't gone deep enough to take fingers, and the color was coming back. She wrapped both hands around the cup, breathing in the steam. Thank you, she said quietly. For this. For everything. Caleb shrugged. Storm's almost over. Tomorrow, maybe the day after, I can get you to town. You can figure out what's next from there. Something shifted in her expression. Fear, maybe. Or something worse. What if I don't want to go to town? Then you tell me where you do want to go, and I'll take you there. What if I don't want to go anywhere? He looked at her carefully. She met his gaze, steady despite everything. You can't stay here, he said. Why not? Because this is my place, my home. I don't do visitors. I don't do company. I don't... He stopped, took a breath. This isn't personal. This is just how I live. I could help, she said. I can work. I'm not weak, I was hurt, but I heal. I can cook, clean, help with the animals. Whatever you need. I don't need anything. Everyone needs something. Not me. She set down the coffee cup, folded her hands in her lap. The bruises on her face were fading to yellow and green, but they were still there, still visible. Whoever's looking for you, he started. No one's looking for me. People don't end up like you ended up unless someone's looking. Her jaw tightened. They think I'm dead. The words sat heavy in the small space between them. Did you kill someone? Caleb asked. No. Did you steal something? No. Then what? I left. Her voice was quiet but hard, like iron wrapped in cloth. I left someone who thought he owned me, someone who would rather see me dead than free. And now I'm free, and I'm not going back, and I'm not going to any town where he might hear about me. So if you're going to put me out, just say so. But don't pretend it's about rules or space or any of that. Just say you don't want to get involved. Caleb stood there, coffee cup in hand, looking at this woman who'd crawled into his wagon to die rather than go back to whatever hell she'd left. He thought about the scars on his own back, the ones nobody could see. 1 month, he heard himself say. You can stay 1 month until you're healed, until the road's clear and you can get somewhere safe. But then you go. We understand each other? Relief flooded her face, so naked and real it made him look away. Yes, she said. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. But she already had. Stout. The storm broke on the 4th day, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow reached halfway up the cabin walls. The path to the barn was buried. The whole valley looked like someone had pulled a clean white sheet over everything sharp and real. Caleb spent the morning digging out. Alara watched from the window at first, then appeared beside him with a wooden bucket, using it as a makeshift shovel. I told you to rest, he said. I've been resting for 4 days. I'm going crazy. She worked beside him, slower than him but steady. Her breath came hard and her hands shook, but she didn't quit. By noon, they'd cleared a path to the barn and dug out the door. Greta nickered when Caleb came in, pushing her nose against his chest. He checked her over, made sure she had feed and water, mucked the stall. Alara stood in the doorway, watching. She's beautiful, she said. She's practical. Can't she be both? He didn't answer, just finished his work and headed back to the cabin. Alara followed, and somewhere in that walk, something shifted. She wasn't just a problem to solve anymore. She was there, present, real. It scared him more than the storm had. That night, she made dinner. He tried to stop her, but she ignored him, moving around the small kitchen area like she'd been there for years instead of days. She made something with the dried meat and beans and some herbs she found in his poorly organized supplies. It was better than anything he'd made in months. Where'd you learn to cook? He asked. My mother, before... She stopped, stirred the pot. Before everything. He didn't push. They ate in silence, but it was different now. Less heavy, almost comfortable. After dinner, she washed the dishes without being asked. He sat in his chair, pretending to read a book he'd read 6 times already, watching her move in the lamplight. You said 1 month, she said, not turning around. That's right. What happens after? You tell me. She was quiet for a long time, hands still in the wash water. I don't know where to go. I don't have money. I don't have family. I have nothing except what I'm wearing, and I'm only wearing that because you cleaned it. There are places, churches, organizations that help women. I don't want charity. She turned, drying her hands on a rag. I want to work. I want to earn my way. I'm not afraid of hard work. I can see that. So let me stay. Let me help. You need help here. Don't pretend you don't. This place is falling apart. Your clothes are held together with hope. When's the last time you had a proper meal? When's the last time someone... Stop. She stopped. Caleb stood, the book forgotten in his chair. You don't know anything about me. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. No. Why not? Because it's none of your damn business. The words came out harder than he meant, echoing in the small cabin. Alara didn't flinch, just looked at him with those dark eyes that saw too much. You're right, she said quietly. It's not my business. Just like my past isn't yours. We both have things we don't talk about. Fine. We don't have to talk. We can just exist, work, survive. Isn't that what you've been doing anyway? Alone. And how's that working out for you? He wanted to be angry, should have been angry. But looking at her standing there in his cabin, in clothes he'd washed, skin he'd kept from freezing, he couldn't find it. 1 month, he said again. 1 month, she agreed. But they both knew it was a lie. The days developed a pattern. Caleb would wake before dawn, build up the fire, start coffee. Alara would wake soon after, moving quietly through her own morning routine. They'd eat breakfast, usually cornmeal mush or fried bread, without much talk, then work. There was always work, wood to split, snow to clear, animals to tend. Caleb had 3 chickens that had survived the winter, stubborn birds that gave eggs sporadically. Alara took over their care without asking, talking to them like they were people. That one's Beatrice, she told him one morning, pointing to the fattest hen. She's judgmental but fair. It's a chicken. She's Beatrice. He didn't argue. She organized his supplies, darned his clothes, found things he didn't even know were broken and fixed them. She moved through the cabin like water, filling spaces he didn't know were empty. It should have bothered him, should have felt like an invasion. It didn't. At night, they'd sit by the fire. Sometimes she'd read from his small collection of books. Shakespeare, Whitman, a falling-apart copy of Robinson Crusoe. Her voice filled the cabin, gave it a life it hadn't had in years. He never asked her to read. She just did. 1 week passed, then 2. Caleb went into town once for supplies, leaving Alara at the cabin. He didn't like it, didn't like leaving her alone, didn't like how much he didn't like it. But he needed flour and coffee and nails, and the chickens needed feed. The town was called Redemption, which was either hopeful or cruel, depending on who you asked. 200 people spread across a main street and a few side roads, everyone knowing everyone else's business, everyone watching. He got his supplies from Mercer's General Store, nodded to Mrs. Yao who ran the boarding house, avoided eye contact with anyone else. On his way out, he ran into Sheriff Donnelly, literally ran into him. Whoa there, Caleb. Donnelly was a big man, solid, with gray threading through his dark beard. Good man, as far as Caleb could tell. Fair. Where's the fire? No fire, just heading home. Hold on a minute. Donnelly's eyes were sharp. Haven't seen you in a while. Everything all right out at your place? Fine. Storm hit pretty hard. We managed. We? Damn. Caleb kept his face neutral. Me and Greta. Donnelly studied him for a long moment. Right. Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me. Appreciate it. He made it to his wagon before Donnelly called after him. Caleb? He turned. Someone came through about 3 weeks back, man named Vance. Asked if anyone had seen a woman. Dark hair, thin, probably hurt. Said she was his wife. Said she ran off, might be confused, dangerous even. Donnelly paused. You see anyone like that? Caleb's blood went cold, but his face didn't move. No. Didn't think so.
but I'm asking everyone. This Vance, he seemed wrong.
Couldn't put my finger on it. Too smooth, too concerned, like he was reading from a script. What did you tell him? Told him we'd keep an eye out. Told him to check the next town over. Donnelly's eyes were sharp on Caleb's face. Told him most folks out here mind their own business and expect the same. Smart advice. I thought so. They looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Storm that bad damaged the road north, Donnelly said casually. Won't be passable for weeks, month maybe. Anyone trying to come through would have to go the long way around, 3-4 weeks minimum. Good to know. Figured you'd want to know. Caleb nodded once, climbed into his wagon. His hands were steady on the reins. His face was calm. Inside, his mind was racing. Vance, her husband, looking for her. The whole ride home, he chewed on it. The name, the description, the way Donnelly had watched him, the careful warning wrapped in casual information. Elara had said no one was looking. She'd been wrong. When he got back to the cabin, she was outside, hanging laundry on a line she'd rigged between 2 trees. Her hands were red with cold, but she was smiling at something, talking to Beatrice, who'd followed her out like a dog. She saw him and waved. He waved back. That night, after dinner, he told her. She went very still. Vance, she said. The name came out like poison. Your husband? No. Her voice was flat. My owner. That's what he thought. That I was something he owned. He said you were confused. Dangerous. She laughed, bitter and sharp. Of course he did. Make me the crazy one. Make me the problem. That's always been his way. What does he want? Me? Back. Under his control. She stood, paced the small cabin like a caged animal. He can't stand losing, can't stand being wrong. I was supposed to die. I was supposed to give up. The fact that I didn't, that I survived, it kills him. The sheriff didn't believe him. Doesn't matter. Vance will find another way. He always does. Caleb watched her pace, seeing the fear underneath the anger. The road north is washed out. Storm damage. He can't get here for at least a month, maybe more. She stopped, turned. You're sure? Sheriff's sure. The sheriff knows? About me? He suspects, but he's not saying anything. Told me without telling me. Elara sat down hard in the chair, like her legs had stopped working. So I have a month. We have a month. The word was out before he could stop it. We. She looked up at him, something breaking in her expression. You don't have to. I know. This isn't your fight. I know that too. Then why? Because I pulled you out of that wagon, he said, the words coming from somewhere deep and true. Because I brought you here. Because you're here now, and that means something. I don't know what yet, but it means something. She didn't cry, but her eyes were wet when she looked at him. 1 month, she said. 1 month. This time, they both knew what it meant. The next 2 weeks were different. Caleb taught her to shoot. Started with the old rifle, the one with a loose stock and a tendency to pull left. She was terrible at first, flinching every time she pulled the trigger, missing the target by feet. Stop thinking, he told her. Just breathe and squeeze. I am breathing. You're holding your breath. Breathe through it. She tried again. Missed again. Swore in a way that would have made a sailor proud. Better, he said. I missed. But you're getting mad about it. That's progress. She shot him a look, but there was humor in it. After a week, she could hit the target more often than not. After 2 weeks, she was grouping shots tight enough that he started to worry about his ammunition supply. Where'd you learn this? She asked one afternoon, her breath misting in the cold air. Necessity. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. She studied him, the rifle loose in her hands. You were military. It wasn't a question. Long time ago. What happened? What always happens. I got tired of taking orders, tired of seeing good people die for bad reasons. So I left. And came here. And came here. She nodded, like that made sense. Maybe it did. They walked back to the cabin in comfortable silence. And Caleb tried to remember the last time silence had felt comfortable with another person. Couldn't. That night, she asked about the scar on his hand, the jagged line that ran from his thumb to his wrist. Knife fight, he said. Did you win? I'm still here. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. She smiled. Actually smiled. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, less haunted. You're a stubborn man, Caleb Rourke. So I've been told. I like it. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing, just added another log to the fire and let the moment settle. The days were getting longer. The snow was melting, revealing brown grass and mud. Spring was coming, slow but certain, and with it, the end of their time. Neither of them said it, but they both felt it, in the way she watched him work, in the way he found excuses to stay close to the cabin, in the careful dance they did around the growing thing between them that neither was ready to name. Then, 3 weeks in, everything changed. Caleb was in the barn, mucking stalls when he heard voices, men's voices, coming from the direction of the cabin. His blood went cold. He dropped the pitchfork, grabbed the rifle he kept by the door, and moved, fast but quiet, years of training kicking in. 3 men stood in front of his cabin. 2 he recognized from town, Miller and his son. Rough types who worked odd jobs and drank most of their pay. The third was a stranger, clean-shaven, well-dressed, wrong. Alara stood in the doorway, blocking it with her body. She looked small against the frame, but her spine was straight. Told you, there's no one here but me and my employer, she was saying, voice steady. Your employer? The stranger's voice was smooth, educated. And where might he be? Working, not here. I see. And you are? None of your business. Miller stepped forward. Now that's not very friendly, miss. We're just asking questions. And I'm not answering them. Caleb moved closer, using the trees for cover. He could see Alara's face now, pale but determined. Could see the stranger's expression, calculating, predatory. My name is Mr. Vance, the stranger said. I'm looking for my wife. She's ill, confused. She might not even know who she is. Dark hair, thin, about your height. I haven't seen anyone like that. Are you sure? Because you seem nervous. I'm not nervous. I'm busy, and you're trespassing. Trespassing? Vance smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I wasn't aware this land was posted. It is. Now leave. Miller's son moved to the side, trying to get a better angle on the cabin, trying to see inside. That's when Caleb stepped out of the trees. Problem here? All 3 men turned. Vance's eyes went sharp, assessing. Miller relaxed a bit. He knew Caleb, knew his reputation. No problem, Miller said. Just helping this gentleman look for his wife. On my land? Like he said, didn't realize. The property line is clearly marked. You crossed it. That's trespassing. Caleb kept the rifle low but visible. Not threatening, just present. Vance stepped forward, hand out. Mr. Rourke, and I don't shake hands with trespassers. The hand dropped. Vance's smile tightened. Mr. Rourke, as I was explaining to your employee here, I'm looking for my wife. She's been missing for several weeks. I'm very worried about her. Then you should talk to the sheriff. I have. He suggested I check with homesteaders in the area, just in case someone had seen her. No one here but me and my hired hand. Caleb jerked his head toward Alara. And we haven't seen anyone. Vance looked at Alara. Really looked at her. She stared back, unflinching. Your hired hand, Vance said slowly. She looks busy. We're busy. Storm damage to fix. Work to do. And you're interrupting. Of course. I apologize. But Vance didn't move. It's just my wife. She might not be herself. Might not even remember me. If you do see anyone at all, I'd appreciate it if you'd send word. I'm staying at the boarding house in town. There's a reward, of course. $50. $50. Almost a year's wages for some men. We'll keep an eye out, Caleb said, voice flat. I'd appreciate it. Vance tipped his hat to Alara. Miss. She didn't respond. The 3 men left, Miller and his son walking fast, Vance slower, looking back twice. Caleb watched until they were out of sight, then watched longer, making sure. Only when he was certain did he lower the rifle and turn to Alara. She was shaking, not obvious, not dramatic, just a fine tremor running through her whole body, teeth clenched to keep from chattering. "Inside," he said. She moved like a puppet, mechanical. Once the door closed behind them, she sat down hard, hands gripping the edge of the table.
"He knows," she whispered. "He suspects. He knows. You saw the way he looked at me. He knows." Knowing and proving are different things. She laughed, wild and bitter. "You think proof matters to him? You think he needs proof? He'll come back, with more men, with guns. He'll take me or he'll burn this place down trying. No, he won't. You don't know him. I know men like him." Caleb sat across from her, caught her eyes. "Men who think the rules don't apply to them. Men who think money and manners make them better. I know them. And I know they bleed just like everyone else. Caleb, you're not going back. Not to him."
"Not to anyone. That's the end of it." He offered $50. "I don't need $50. That's a fortune. I don't need it," he said again, harder. "You hear me? I don't need it. I don't want it. All I want is for you to stay safe. Here. With me." The words hung between them, bigger than he'd meant. Alara's eyes were wide, searching his face. "Why?" "I don't know. That's not good enough. It's all I have." She reached across the table, her damaged hands covering his scarred ones. "He'll come back. I know. He'll bring trouble. I know that too. And you're still—" "Yes." She squeezed his hands once, hard, then stood, moving to the window, looking out at the melting snow and the far mountains. "1 month," she said softly. But they both knew the month was over. Now they were in something different, something deeper, something that might kill them both, and neither of them was willing to walk away. The week after Vance's visit crawled by like something wounded. Every sound outside made Alara's head snap up. Every stranger on the road, and there weren't many, got watched until they disappeared from sight. Caleb found himself sleeping lighter, the rifle closer, his mind running through scenarios he didn't want to think about. They didn't talk about it, didn't need to. But the cabin felt smaller now, like the walls were pressing in, like the world outside had found them and was just waiting for the right moment to break through. Caleb threw himself into work, fixed the fence line that had collapsed under snow weight, replaced boards on the barn roof, split enough wood to last through next winter. Physical labor that left him too tired to think at night. Alara matched him, task for task. She mucked stalls, hauled water, scraped old mud from between the floorboards until her knees were bruised and her hands raw. When he told her to rest, she ignored him. "I need to be useful," she said one afternoon, dirt smudged across her cheek. "You are useful. I need to be more useful than the trouble I'm bringing." "That's not how it works." "Isn't it?" He didn't have an answer for that. On the 8th day after Vance's visit, Caleb went back to town. Needed nails. Needed to hear what people were saying. Needed to know if trouble was brewing or if Vance had moved on. The ride-in was quiet. Early spring had turned the roads into mud tracks that sucked at Greta's hooves. New grass was coming up in patches, fighting through dead brown from winter. The sky was gray, threatening rain. Redemption looked the same as always, tired buildings squatting in mud, people moving between them with purpose. Caleb tied Greta outside Mercer's, nodded to a few folks he recognized, and went inside. The store smelled like coffee and sawdust. Mercer was behind the counter, sorting through a ledger with fingers stained from ink. "Caleb." Mercer was a small man, bald, sharp-eyed, fair with prices. "Need supplies?" "Nails, 10 pounds if you've got them." "Got 12. Take them all if you want." "10's fine." Mercer measured them out, wrapped them in brown paper, tied it with twine. His movements were practiced, efficient. "How's things out your way?" "Fine." "Storm do much damage?" "Some. Fixed most of it." "Heard you got help now. Hired hand." There it was, the question under the question. "That's right," Caleb said, keeping his voice level. "Good help's hard to find." "It is." Mercer looked at him for a long moment. Then he leaned in, voice dropping.
That gentleman who came through, Vance, he's been asking around, talking to people, showing a picture. Caleb's hand tightened on the counter. Picture of what? Woman, young, dark hair, says it's his wife. Mercer paused. Doesn't look much like the sketch, if I'm being honest. Looks like someone drew what they wanted to see, not what was actually there. He's still in town? Boarding house. Been there over a week now. Not doing much. Just waiting. Waiting for what? That's the question, isn't it? Mercer pushed the package of nails across the counter. Mrs. Yao says he gives her the creeps. Says he's too polite, too careful, like he's playing a part. She say anything else? She says he asked her about every homestead within 20 miles. Who lives where, who's got family, who's alone. Mercer's eyes were steady on Caleb's face. She told him most folks out here keep to themselves. Told him asking too many questions is a good way to stop getting answers. Smart woman. Always has been. Mercer rang up the nails, took Caleb's money, made change. You need anything else? You let me know. And Caleb, you watch yourself. Always do. Outside, the gray sky had started spitting rain.
Caleb loaded the nails into the wagon, checked Greta's harness, and was about to climb up when he heard voices from the alley beside the boarding house. Waste of time. She's not here. She's here. I know it. Caleb recognized Vance's voice, smooth, certain. The other voice was rougher, unfamiliar. You've been here 10 days, shown that picture to everyone. Nobody's seen her. Someone's lying. Or she's dead, or she made it to the next territory, or she never came this way at all. She came this way. I tracked her to the train station. Conductor remembered her, said she got off here. Train station's 40 miles from here. She would have looked for the most isolated place she could find, somewhere she thought I'd never look. This is it. A pause, then the rougher voice again. What do you want me to do? Keep watching, the homesteads, especially the ones on the outskirts. Anyone new, anyone acting strange. Strange how? Jumpy, nervous, hiding something.
That's half the people out here. Then watch all of them. Footsteps. Coming toward the mouth of the alley. Caleb climbed into his wagon, shook the reins, and pulled away at a normal pace. Not too fast, not too slow. Just a man heading home after buying supplies. In the boarding house window, he caught a glimpse of Vance watching him. Their eyes met for a second. Then Caleb turned the corner, and the moment broke. The ride home was longer than the ride in. The rain picked up, steady and cold. Caleb's mind worked through what he'd heard. Vance wasn't leaving, wasn't giving up, was actively looking, had hired help now, and he was watching. By the time Caleb reached the cabin, he'd made a decision. Alara was inside, cooking something that smelled better than it had any right to. She looked up when he came in, read his face, and put down the spoon. What happened? He's still in town, hired someone to watch the homesteads. She went pale. He knows. He suspects, doesn't have proof. Yet. Yet, Caleb agreed. He set down the nails, shook rain from his coat. We need to be smarter, more careful. I should leave. No. Caleb, no. He turned to face her. You leave now, alone. He'll find you in a day. 2 if you're lucky. Out here, you've got a chance. You've got me. That's not fair to you. Life's not fair. We work with what we've got. She looked at him, something working behind her eyes. Fear, yes, but also something else. Something that looked like hope trying not to get itself killed. What do we do? She asked quietly. We live normal. You're my hired hand. You stay out of sight when people come around, but not so out of sight it looks suspicious. We have a story, and we stick to it. And if anyone asks direct questions, I'm your cousin, Alara said, from back east. Family fell on hard times. Came out here to help until I can get back on my feet. You've been thinking about this. I think about everything. She stirred the pot, not looking at him. I think about what happens if he finds me. What happens if he doesn't? What happens to you because you helped me? I think about all of it, all the time, and I can't make it stop. Caleb crossed the small space between them, stopped just close enough that she had to look up. Listen to me. Whatever happens, we face it together. That's the deal. You don't run. I don't quit. We figure it out. Understand?
Why are you doing this? The question again, the one he still didn't have a good answer for. Because it's right, he said finally. Right doesn't keep you alive. No, but it lets you sleep at night. She almost smiled at that. Almost. That night they ate dinner in silence. The rain hammered on the roof, steady and relentless. Spring rain, the kind that soaked deep and turned everything to mud. Afterward, Alara read while Caleb cleaned his rifle. The routine was familiar now, comfortable. She'd stumble over words sometimes, her education showing gaps, and he'd correct her pronunciation without thinking. She'd absorb it, file it away, keep going. What's this word? She held up the book, Whitman, pointing to a line. Multitudes. Multitudes. She sounded it out. What's it mean? Lots of things, lots of people, many. I contain multitudes. She read the line again, softer. Do you think that's true? What? That people contain multitudes, that we're more than one thing. Caleb thought about the man he'd been before the war, the man during, the man after. Yeah, I think that's true. What multitudes do you contain? Nothing good. I don't believe that. You should. She set down the book, looked at him across the small space. The lamplight caught in her dark hair, made her eyes luminous. I think you contain kindness, she said, even though you pretend you don't. I think you contain courage, the kind that doesn't need an audience. And I think you contain loneliness. So much of it you built a whole life around keeping it close. Her words hit like fists, accurate and brutal. You don't know me, he said. I'm learning. Don't. Too late. They stared at each other. The rain filled the silence between them. Outside, wind rattled the shutters. I had a daughter, Caleb heard himself say. The words came from somewhere deep, a place he'd locked down tight. Long time ago, before the war, she died. Fever. My wife blamed me. Said I should have gotten the doctor sooner, should have done more. She was probably right. Alara didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. When the war started, I left. Told myself it was duty. Told myself I was fighting for something bigger. Truth was, I couldn't stand being in that house anymore. Couldn't stand seeing my wife look at me like I'd murdered our child with my own hands. That's not... I came back 3 years later. She was gone. Took what little we had and disappeared. Left a note that said she couldn't forgive me and I shouldn't try to find her. He set down the rifle, looked at his hands. So I didn't. Came out here instead. Built this place. Figured if I got far enough away from people, I couldn't hurt them anymore. The silence stretched. Then Alara spoke, her voice quiet but steady. I was married at 17. My father owed money. Vance paid his debts in exchange for me. Like I was property, like I was something that could be bought and sold. She wrapped her arms around herself. He was kind at first, gentle. Then he got comfortable. Started showing who he really was. Started with words. Then fists. Then other things. Caleb's jaw tightened. Alara, I tried to leave twice. First time he found me in 6 hours. Dragged me back, locked me in a room for a week. Second time, I made it 2 days. He broke my arm when he brought me back. Told everyone I fell. They believed him because he's respectable, and I'm no one. That's why you chose the wagon, why you'd rather freeze. I'd rather die free than live as his thing. She looked at him, eyes fierce. So yes, I climbed into your wagon knowing I might not survive. And when you pulled back that canvas, when you could have just left me there, you didn't. You saved me. Not because you had to, because you chose to. That doesn't make me a good man. It doesn't make you a bad one either. They sat with that, 2 broken people in a small cabin, rain drumming overhead. We're a mess, Caleb said finally. Yes. This won't end well. Probably not. You should run. Take your chances. I'm not running anymore. Her voice was hard, final. I'm done running. Then you're a fool. Maybe. But I'm a fool who can shoot now, and I'm a fool who's not alone. Despite everything, Caleb almost smiled. Fair point. The next 2 weeks were strange, careful. They fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal, except for the constant awareness of being watched. Caleb saw riders on the ridge twice, too far away to identify, but he knew. Someone was keeping tabs. He didn't tell Alara, didn't need to add to her worry. Instead, he taught her other things. How to track game, how to read weather in the clouds, how to find water even when the streams ran dry, skills that could keep her alive if everything went wrong. She absorbed it all like someone building an arsenal against the future. One morning, she woke before him. He found her outside, watching the sunrise paint the valley gold and pink. "It's beautiful here," she said when he joined her. "It is. I never noticed beauty before. Not really. I was always too busy surviving. And now? Now I notice." She glanced at him. "You gave me that. The space to notice." Before he could respond, Greta nickered from the barn. Alert, nervous. Caleb's hand went to the rifle he'd started carrying everywhere. "Inside! Now!" Alara didn't argue. She moved fast, silent, years of survival instinct kicking in. 3 riders were coming up the valley, moving slow, deliberate. Caleb recognized Miller from town. The other 2 were strangers. Hard men. The kind who got paid to do things other people wouldn't. He stepped out to meet them, rifle held casual but ready. "Miller?" "Caleb?" Miller looked uncomfortable. The 2 strangers didn't look anything. "Something I can help you with?" "Mr. Vance sent us. Wants to talk to your hired hand." "About what?" "Says she might have information about his wife. Wants to ask some questions." "She doesn't know anything." "Then she can tell him that herself." "She's not here." "Where is she?" "Town, getting supplies." It was a weak lie and everyone knew it. The strangers exchanged looks. "We'll wait," one of them said. "No, you won't. This is private property. You're not welcome here. We're just trying to help a man find his wife, and I'm just trying to live in peace. You're trespassing. Leave." The stranger who'd spoken urged his horse forward, close enough that Caleb could see the scar running down his jaw, the cold calculation in his eyes. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "I don't think I am." "Mr. Vance is offering good money for information. Real good money. Enough to set a man up comfortable for a long time." "Not interested." "Everyone's interested in money." "Not everyone." The man leaned down, voice dropping. "You're protecting someone. We know it. Vance knows it. This can go easy or it can go hard. Your choice." Caleb raised the rifle, not pointing it, just bringing it up where everyone could see it clearly. "Here's my choice. You turn those horses around and ride out. You tell Vance I don't have his wife. I don't know where his wife is. And if he sends people to my land again, I'll consider it a threat and respond accordingly." "That's a dangerous thing to say." "Living's dangerous. Get used to it." For a long moment, nobody moved. The morning stretched tight, one word away from breaking into violence. Then Miller cleared his throat. "Come on. He doesn't know anything. Let's go." The scarred man didn't move, just stared at Caleb, memorizing his face. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "It is for today." Finally, they turned. Rode out the way they'd come, slow and deliberate, making sure Caleb knew this was a choice, not a retreat. When they were out of sight, Caleb lowered the rifle. His hands weren't shaking. That surprised him. Alara appeared in the doorway. "You heard?" he asked. "All of it. They'll be back." "I know. With more men next time. Maybe the sheriff. Maybe a warrant. Vance has money. Money buys a lot of things, including the law." "So what do we do?" Caleb looked at the valley, the mountains beyond, the sky going blue overhead. He'd come here to hide, to forget, to disappear. But some things couldn't be outrun. "We prepare," he said, "and we hope we're ready when it comes." That afternoon they moved supplies, extra ammunition to the barn, food and water to a dugout cellar Caleb had built his first year, half forgotten until now. He checked the cabin's sight lines, noted where cover was, where exposure was. Alara watched him work, understanding what he was doing. "You've done this before," she said. "Different war, same principles." "How did it end? That war?" "Badly, for everyone."
She helped him stack firewood against the north wall, extra protection against bullets. Her movements were efficient, practiced. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. When the sun started going down, they went inside, barred the door. Caleb loaded both rifles, set them where they could be grabbed fast. They ate cold food, not wanting smoke from cooking to give away their position if someone was watching. "I'm sorry," Elara said quietly. "For what?" "For bringing this to your door. You didn't bring it. It followed you. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." She didn't look convinced. That night, neither of them slept much. Caleb sat in his chair, rifle across his knees, listening to the darkness. Elara lay in the bed, facing the wall, so still he knew she was faking sleep. Around midnight, she spoke. "Caleb?" "Yeah." "If they come, if it goes bad, promise me something." "What?" "Don't let him take me alive." The words hit like cold water. He understood what she was asking, what she was afraid of. "It won't come to that. Promise me anyway." "Elara, please." He closed his eyes, opened them. "I promise." "Thank you." Silence settled again, but it was different now, heavier. "I won't let him take you," Caleb said into the dark. "I won't let anyone take you. Not while I'm breathing. That's what I'm afraid of." "What?" "That you'll stop breathing because of me." "We all stop breathing eventually." "That's not funny." "Wasn't trying to be." He heard her shift, imagined her turning to face the room even though he couldn't see her in the darkness. "When this is over," she said, "when Vance is gone, or we're dead, or whatever happens, I want you to know something." "What?" "These weeks here, in this cabin, with you, they've been the freest I've ever felt. Even scared, even knowing what's coming. I've been more myself here than I was in 23 years before." Caleb didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to hold something that fragile without breaking it. "Get some sleep," he said finally. "Tomorrow we figure out our next move." "What is our next move?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." "Together?" "Together." He heard her settle back down, heard her breathing even out, but he knew she wasn't sleeping any more than he was. The week that followed was tense. Caleb went to town twice more, each time expecting trouble, each time finding Vance watching from the boarding house window. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. The message was clear. "I know. I'm waiting. I'm patient." Sheriff Donnelly pulled Caleb aside after the second visit. "This situation with Vance is getting complicated," Donnelly said. They were standing outside his office, close enough to be private, far enough to look casual. "How complicated?" "He's filed a missing person report. Official. Says his wife is in danger, possibly being held against her will. Says he has reason to believe she's in this area." "That's a lie." "Maybe, but it's a legal lie. Puts me in a position." Donnelly's eyes were troubled. "I have to investigate, have to follow up on credible reports." "And you consider him credible?" "I consider him connected, rich, the kind of man who can make problems for people who don't cooperate." Donnelly paused. "Including me." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'll do what I can, delay things, lose paperwork, take my time, but eventually I'll have to come out to your place, have to ask questions, and if someone matching his wife's description is there, she's not his wife, she's my employee. Can you prove that?" Caleb said nothing. "That's what I thought." Donnelly sighed. "Look, I'm on your side here. I don't like Vance, don't trust him, but the law's the law, and right now it's on his side. You need to understand that." "How much time do I have?" "Week, maybe 2. He's pushing hard, but I'm pushing back. Won't last forever, though." "Understood." Donnelly looked at him for a long moment. "Whatever you're planning, be smart about it. And Caleb, be careful. Vance isn't just rich, he's dangerous. The kind of dangerous that wears a smile while it cuts your throat." "I've known men like that before." "I know. That's what worries me." Caleb rode home with Donnelly's warning sitting heavy in his gut. 1 week, maybe 2. Then the law would come knocking, and all the righteousness in the world wouldn't matter against a legal claim. He needed a plan, a real one.
not just hope and defiance. When he got back to the cabin, Ilara was outside, hanging laundry. Domestic, normal, like they were just two people living a simple life. She saw his face and knew immediately. What happened? He told her. All of it. Donnelly's warning, the timeline, the legal complications. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded once, sharp and final. Then we have 2 weeks to disappear. What? You heard me. We take what we can carry, leave the rest, and disappear. Head into the mountains. There are old mining camps up there, right? Abandoned? We hole up until Vance gives up and leaves. He won't give up. Then we stay gone until he does. Ilara, it's still winter in the high country. We'd be lucky to last a month. Then we last a month. It's better than the alternative. Caleb looked at her, standing there in his yard, holding a wet shirt, planning to disappear into wilderness that could kill them both. There's another option, he said slowly. What? We fight. Against the law? Against Vance. Directly. The plan was forming as he spoke, half thought through but solid enough. He wants proof you're here. We make sure he doesn't get it. We document everything. Get witnesses. Build a case that you're exactly who you say you are. My hired hand, my cousin. Here of your own free will. That won't work. It might, if we do it right. Get people on our side, show that Vance is lying, show his pattern of abuse. Who's going to believe me over him? People who've met him. People who've seen how he operates. He's been in town 2 weeks, and already people don't like him. We use that. Ilara shook her head. You're talking about fighting money with testimony, power with stories. That never works. It might if the stories are good enough. And if they're not, then we try your plan. Mountains, survival, all of it. She studied him, chewing her lip, thinking it through. This is crazy, she said finally. Probably. We could both end up in jail, or worse. Probably that too. You're willing to risk it? Are you? She looked at the cabin behind her, the valley, the life they'd started building in the cracks between danger. Yes, she said. I'm willing to risk it. Then we start tomorrow. Together. Together, she agreed. And in that moment, with laundry drying in the spring wind and trouble gathering on the horizon, they became something more than two people hiding from the world. They became partners. The plan started simple enough. They'd go to town together the next day, let people see them as employer and employee, nothing hidden, nothing suspicious, build normalcy where Vance was trying to plant doubt. But the sky had other ideas. Caleb woke to a pressure change he felt in his bones. The air tasted like metal. The light coming through the shutters was wrong, too green, too still. He was up and dressed before his brain fully caught up, moving on instinct honed from years of reading weather that could kill. Storm coming, he said when Ilara emerged from behind the privacy screen he'd rigged for her. Big one. She looked toward the window. How big? The kind that buries everything. When? Today. Maybe hours. They worked fast. Caleb brought in extra firewood, stacked it high against the inside wall. Ilara secured the shutters, stuffed rags in gaps where wind could whistle through. They hauled water from the stream until they had 3 barrels full, moved all the tools from the barn into the cabin, checked and double-checked their supplies. By noon, the sky had gone the color of old bruises. The wind picked up, gusting hard enough to rattle the walls. The temperature dropped so fast Caleb could watch his breath thicken in the air. We need to check on Greta, he said. The barn was only 50 feet from the cabin, but the wind was already screaming. They made it there bent double, Caleb leading, Ilara's hand gripping his coat. Inside, Greta was nervous, stamping and tossing her head. Easy, girl, Caleb murmured, running his hands over her. She was warm, healthy, but anxious. Animals always knew when something bad was coming. He gave her extra feed, fresh water, made sure the barn door was secured, but not so tight she'd be trapped if something went wrong. The chickens were huddled in their corner, even Beatrice looking subdued. They'll be okay? Ilara asked. They've survived worse. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. The walk back to the cabin was harder. The wind had teeth now,
carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin. Snow was starting to fall. Not the gentle kind, but hard pellets that came at them sideways. They made it inside and barred the door just as the storm hit in earnest. It sounded like the sky was tearing itself apart. Wind hammered the cabin from every direction at once. Snow came so thick and fast the windows went white, then disappeared entirely. The temperature inside dropped despite the fire roaring in the hearth. Caleb added more wood, then more. Alara wrapped herself in blankets, watching the storm with wide eyes. "I've never seen anything like this," she said, almost shouting to be heard. "Pray you never do again." The word slipped out before he could catch it. He saw her notice, saw her choose not to comment. They settled in to wait.
There was nothing else to do. Outside, the world was ending in white. Inside, they had fire and food and each other. Hours crawled by. The storm didn't ease. If anything, it got worse. The cabin creaked and groaned under the assault. At one point, something hit the roof hard enough to shake snow down from the rafters. "What was that?" Alara asked. "Branch probably, maybe part of a tree." "Will the roof hold?" "It better." More hours. The light outside never changed, just stayed that same weird twilight white. Caleb had no idea if it was afternoon or evening or middle of the night. Time had stopped meaning anything. They ate cold food, talked a little, mostly just sat, listening to the storm rage. Around what Caleb guessed was midnight, though he couldn't be sure, the wind changed direction. Swung north, the temperature dropped even further. Ice formed on the inside of the shutters. "We need to keep moving," he said. "Can't let ourselves get too cold." They paced the small cabin, did simple exercises. Caleb showed her stretches that kept blood flowing. Every hour he checked the fire, added wood, made sure they weren't burning through it too fast. The second day was worse than the first. The storm had settled into a steady, brutal assault. The world outside didn't exist anymore. Just white, just wind, just cold so deep it felt like the bones of the earth cracking. Caleb rationed the firewood carefully. They had enough for maybe 5 days if they were careful. After that, well, after that didn't bear thinking about. Alara helped without being asked. She understood the mathematics of survival now. One log too many now meant freezing later. One moment of carelessness meant death. They took turns sleeping, never both at once. Someone always needed to watch the fire, listen for danger, stay aware. On the third morning, if it was morning, Caleb heard something over the wind, a sound that didn't belong. "You hear that?" he asked. Alara tilted her head, listening. "What am I listening for?" "Not sure. There it is again." It was faint, almost lost in the storm. A cry. Animal or human, he couldn't tell. "Could be wind," Alara said. "Could be." But it came again, rhythmic, desperate. "It's Greta," Caleb said, already moving. "Something's wrong." "You can't go out there. You'll die." "She'll die if I don't." He grabbed his coat, his scarf, wrapped himself as tight as he could. Alara caught his arm. "Wait, I'm coming with you." "No, too dangerous. You'll need help. Whatever's wrong, you'll need an extra pair of hands." "Alara, don't." Her voice was hard. "Don't tell me to stay here safe while you risk your life. We're partners, remember? That goes both ways." He wanted to argue, wanted to lock her inside and go alone, but she was right. "Stay close," he said. "Hold on to me. If we get separated in this, we're both dead." She nodded, pulling on the coat he'd given her, wrapping her scarf tight. They roped themselves together with a length of cord. Caleb tied it around his waist, then hers, leaving about 6 feet between them. If one fell, the other could pull them up. If one got lost, the other could reel them back. The second he opened the door, the storm tried to rip it from his hands. Wind and snow blasted into the cabin like a fist. They pushed out into it, and Caleb immediately lost all sense of direction. White. Just white. Everywhere. He knew the barn was 50 feet straight ahead, knew it like he knew his own name. But in the whiteout, 50 feet might as well have been 50 miles. He walked with one arm outstretched, feeling for obstacles. Behind him, Alara held onto the rope, following his lead. The cold was instant and absolute. It found every gap in his clothes, every exposed inch of skin, and attacked. His beard frosted over in seconds, his eyelashes crusted with ice. Breathing hurt. They were 10 steps from the cabin when Caleb realized he had no idea if he was walking in the right direction. 15 steps. 20. His hand hit wood. Not the barn. Too small. The woodpile he'd built along the cabin's north wall. He adjusted, used it as a marker, walked along it until it ended, then straight ahead again, counting steps. 30. 40. His hand hit the barn wall. Relief flooded through him. He felt along until he found the door, fumbled with the latch. His fingers were already numb, clumsy. Behind him, Alara pressed close, using his body as a windbreak. The door swung open. They stumbled inside, and Caleb forced it shut against the wind. The barn was dark and cold, but it was shelter. For a moment, they just stood there, gasping, trying to remember how to breathe without pain. Then Greta screamed. Not a whinny. A scream. The sound a horse makes when something's very wrong. Caleb fumbled for the lantern he kept by the door, got it lit with shaking hands. The light showed him Greta in her stall, wild-eyed, favoring her left front leg. He moved closer. She shied back, clearly in pain. Easy, girl, easy. Let me see. He ran his hands down her leg, slow and careful. She tolerated it until he reached her hoof. Then she jerked away, nearly kicking him. What is it? Alara asked. Something in her hoof, maybe. Or she's injured it somehow. Can't tell with her moving. Can you fix it? Not if she won't let me touch it. Greta stamped and snorted, breathing hard. In the lamplight, Caleb could see foam on her coat. She'd been fighting the pain for a while. We need to calm her down, Alara said. I know. Let me try. Caleb turned. You don't know horses. I know scared animals. I was one for years. She moved past him, slow and careful. Hey there, beautiful. I know it hurts. I know you're afraid. But we're here to help. We won't hurt you. I promise we won't hurt you. Her voice was low, soothing, completely different from her normal tone. She kept up the steady stream of words, moving closer inch by inch. Greta's ears flicked toward her, listening. That's right. You know we're friends. You know Caleb would never hurt you. And I won't either. We just need to see what's wrong. Just need to help. She reached out, let Greta smell her hand. The horse snorted but didn't pull away. Good girl, such a good girl. You're being so brave. Alara's hand touched Greta's neck. Stroked once, twice. The horse trembled but stayed still. Caleb, Alara said quietly, not breaking rhythm. Try now. He moved in slow, keeping his movement small and calm. Greta watched him, nervous, but Alara's hand on her neck seemed to anchor her. He felt down her leg again. This time, when he reached the hoof, she let him lift it. In the lamplight, he saw the problem immediately. A piece of metal, looked like part of an old horseshoe, had worked itself into the frog of her hoof, cutting deep. Blood seeped around it, mixing with mud and ice. It's bad, he said. How bad? If it gets infected, she's done. Can you get it out? Yeah, but it's going to hurt. She might kick, might hurt herself worse. Then we hold her steady. Caleb looked at Alara, this woman who'd shown up dying in his wagon, who'd learned to shoot and survive and now was talking down a panicked horse like she'd done it all her life. You sure about this? No, but we're doing it anyway. He positioned himself, got a good grip on Greta's hoof. The metal was wedged in deep, twisted. It would have to come out clean or risk tearing the flesh worse. Keep talking to her, he said. Alara did. That same low, steady voice, words blending together into pure comfort. Caleb gripped the metal with his knife edge, worked it back and forth. Greta tensed, a tremor running through her whole body. Easy, girl. Almost got it. Almost. It came free. Blood flowed, dark and thick. Greta tried to pull away, but Caleb held firm. He needed to clean the wound, pack it, keep infection out. I need supplies, he said. In the cabin. Medical kit. I'll go. No. You need to stay with her. Keep pressure on that wound. Alara was already moving toward the door. I can make it. Alara, wait. But she was gone, rope trailing behind her, door slamming shut. Caleb swore. He held Greta's hoof, pressing cloth against the wound, trying to stem the bleeding. The horse was calmer now, exhausted from pain. She's crazy, he told Greta. Completely crazy. The seconds crawled by, each one stretched impossible long. The storm howled outside. Caleb imagined Alara lost in the white, wandering in circles, freezing to death. Then the door crashed open. She stumbled in, covered in snow, gasping, holding his medical kit. Found it, she managed. Under your bed. Like you said. Relief hit him so hard his knees went weak. You're an idiot. I know. He cleaned the wound as well as he could with cold water and whiskey. Greta flinched but stayed still. Then he packed it with a paste he'd made from herbs and clay, something an old army medic had taught him. This'll keep infection out if we're lucky, he said. But she needs to stay off it, needs rest and warmth. Will she heal? Maybe, if we keep it clean, if she doesn't put weight on it too soon. He wrapped the hoof in clean cloth, tied it secure. But she's strong. She survived worse. Like us, Alara said. Like us. They stayed in the barn for a while, making sure Greta was stable. Fed her, gave her water, talked to her in low voices. The storm raged on, but here in this small space they'd won a battle. Small victory. But it was something. When they finally made the trip back to the cabin, roped together again, the storm felt different. Still dangerous, still brutal, but survivable. They collapsed inside, soaked and shivering. Caleb built up the fire while Alara peeled off wet layers. They hung everything to dry, then huddled close to the flames. That was stupid, Caleb said. Which part? All of it. We could have died 6 different ways. But we didn't. But we could have. She looked at him, face red from cold, hair a mess, eyes bright. I spent years not doing anything because I might get hurt. Might make him angry. Might make things worse. I'm done with that. If there's something that needs doing, I'm doing it. Even if it kills you? Even then, at least I'll die choosing. He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was being reckless. But looking at her, seeing the fierce determination in her face, he couldn't, because she was right. Next time, he said, we make stupid decisions together. Deal. They sat close to the fire, warming slowly. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside something had shifted. They'd faced death together and won. Not through luck, through trust. Thank you, Caleb said quietly. For what? For being crazy enough to help. Thank you for being crazy enough to let me. The third night of the storm was the worst. The temperature dropped so low that ice formed on the water in their buckets. The fire fought to stay alive despite Caleb feeding it constantly. They wrapped themselves in every blanket, every piece of cloth they had, and still the cold crept in. They took turns sleeping, huddled together for warmth. It wasn't romantic. It was survival. Body heat was body heat, and pride was a luxury they couldn't afford. Somewhere in the deep dark of that night, Alara spoke. If we die here, we're not going to die. But if we do, I want you to know something. What? These last weeks, this life we've built, even temporary, even with everything hanging over us, it's been the best life I've ever had. Caleb felt something crack in his chest. Don't talk like that. Why not? Because we're going to survive this. We're going to make it through, and when we do, you'll have a real life. Not just survival, something better. This is better. This is real. He wanted to argue, but the words stuck in his throat. Because maybe she was right. Maybe this, 2 broken people fighting the world together, maybe this was as real as it got. Sleep, he said finally. I'll keep watch. Wake me in 2 hours. I will. He didn't. Let her sleep through. She needed it more than he did. The 4th day dawned clear. Caleb woke to silence. Absolute, complete silence. The kind that only comes after a storm's passed. He got up carefully, not waking Alara, and opened the shutters. The world outside was transformed. Snow reached halfway up the cabin walls. Drifts towered higher than his head. Everything was buried under white so pure it hurt to look at. But the sky was blue. Clear. The storm was gone. Ilara stirred behind him. Is it over? It's over. She joined him at the window, staring out at the changed landscape. How do we even start digging out of this? One shovel at a time. They spent the day clearing paths, first to the barn. Greta was alive, healing, her hoof showing signs of improvement, then to the woodpile, the stream, the chicken coop. The chickens had survived, even Beatrice, though they looked indignant about the whole experience. By nightfall, they'd cleared enough to function, exhausted, sore, but alive. They ate dinner in comfortable silence. The cabin felt warmer now, safer, like they'd proven it could protect them against anything. Tomorrow, Caleb said, we go to town. Start building our case like we planned. The roads will be impassable. Then we walk part of it. But we're not hiding anymore. We're fighting. Ilara nodded. Together. Together. Outside, stars were coming out, bright and cold and infinite. Inside, the fire crackled. Two people sat across from each other, planning their survival, building something neither of them had names for yet. The storm had tested them. They'd passed, but the real test was still coming, and they both knew it. The morning they planned to go to town, Caleb found blood in the snow. Not much, just a few drops near the tree line, dark against the white, but enough to stop him cold. He crouched down, studying it. Fresh. Maybe an hour old. Could have been an animal, deer, rabbit, anything that called the wilderness home, but the pattern was wrong. The spacing suggested something walking on 2 legs, not 4. What is it? Ilara asked from behind him. Not sure. Stay close to the cabin. He followed the trail. It led east, away from the road, deeper into the trees. More blood. Then drag marks in the snow. Then nothing. Like whoever it was had just stopped bleeding or stopped moving. Caleb pulled his rifle up, scanning the forest. Morning light filtered through pine branches, creating shadows that could hide anything. Hello? He called out. Anyone there? Silence. Just wind in the trees. He moved forward, careful, every sense alert. 20 yards into the forest, he found him. A man, lying face down in the snow. Blood pooled beneath him, already starting to freeze. Caleb approached with the rifle ready, nudged the body with his boot. The man groaned, still alive. Ilara, I need help! She came running, stopped short when she saw the blood. Is he alive? Barely. Caleb rolled him over, and his breath caught. It was the scarred man, the one who'd come with Miller, the one who'd threatened him on Vance's behalf. We should leave him, Ilara said, voice flat. Can't do that. He tried to hurt us. I know. Caleb, I know. He looked up at her. But I can't just let him die. That's not who I am. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she knelt beside the man, started examining his wounds. Gunshot, she said. Shoulder. Went through clean, looks like. But he's lost a lot of blood. Hypothermia's setting in. Can we move him? We have to. He won't last out here. They got him between them, one arm over each shoulder, and half carried, half dragged him back to the cabin. He was conscious enough to help a little, feet moving, but not enough to talk. Inside, they laid him on the floor near the fire. Caleb stripped off the man's frozen coat while Ilara heated water and gathered medical supplies. The wound was bad, but survivable. The bullet had punched through the meaty part of his shoulder, missing bone and major arteries. Lucky. But he'd been out in the cold for hours, and that was the real danger. I need to clean it, Ilara said, kneeling beside him with cloth and whiskey. The man's eyes opened, focused on her face. Recognition flickered. You... His voice was rough, barely there. Don't talk. Save your strength. You're her, his wife. I'm not his wife, never was, not in any way that mattered. He's looking... I know what he's doing. She poured whiskey over the wound. The man hissed, body going rigid. And right now, I'm trying to keep you alive despite your best efforts to die. So shut up and let me work. Caleb watched her clean the wound with steady hands, pack it with the same herb paste they'd used on Greta, wrap it tight. She moved with confidence, like she'd done this before. Where'd you learn that? He asked. Vance had hunting accidents. I was expected to patch them up. Couldn't let anyone see that the great man was clumsy with a gun. The bitterness in her voice could have stripped paint. When she finished, they wrapped the man in blankets, propped him near the fire. His breathing was shallow but steady. Color was starting to come back to his face. "What happened to you?" Caleb asked. The man's eyes found him. "Vance." "He shot you?" "His other man did, on his orders." The scarred man coughed, winced. "We had a disagreement about methods." "What kind of disagreement?" "I told him forcing his way onto your land was a bad idea. Told him to do it legal, proper. He didn't like that." The man's laugh was bitter. "Turns out disagreeing with Mr. Vance is a terminal condition." "So he had you killed." "Tried to. I got away. Made it about a mile before I couldn't go any further." He looked at Alara. "You should have left me. I wouldn't have blamed you." "I wanted to," she said honestly, "but he wouldn't let me." "Why?" Caleb stood, moved to the window. "Because killing you would make me like Vance, and I'm not like him." "You're a fool then." "Probably." The man was quiet for a while, just breathing. Then, "My name's Carson, Thomas Carson, and I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything." "I do, and I pay my debts." Carson tried to sit up, failed, fell back. "Vance is planning something. Soon. He's got 3 more men coming from back east. Hard men, not like Miller. Real professionals." "When?" Caleb asked. "Week, maybe less. They're coming to take her by force. Legal, illegal, doesn't matter to him anymore. He's done waiting." Alara's face had gone pale. "How many men total?" "Including him? 5, maybe 6 if he can buy the sheriff." "Donnelly won't turn," Caleb said. "Everyone turns for the right price." "Not everyone." Carson studied him. "You really believe that, don't you? You really think honor matters?" "It's all that matters." "Then you're going to die. Because Vance doesn't care about honor. He cares about winning, and he always wins." The words sat heavy in the cabin. Outside, snow had started falling again, light this time, just dusting, but it felt ominous anyway. "We need a new plan," Alara said. "We stick with the old plan. Go to town, build witnesses, show people who you really are." "That won't work now, not with 5 armed men coming." "Then what do you suggest?" She looked at Carson, then at Caleb. "We use him." "What?" "He worked for Vance. He knows things. We get him to testify. Tell the sheriff what Vance really is. That changes everything." Carson laughed, sharp and pained. "You think anyone will believe me? I'm a hired gun. My word's worth nothing." "It's worth more than you think," Caleb said slowly, the idea taking shape. "You worked for him. You know his methods. You can show the pattern. And you've got a bullet wound to prove he's not the gentleman he pretends to be. He'll just say I attacked him, that he defended himself. Not if we get your testimony to the sheriff first. Not if we build a case before he has a chance to spin it." Carson was quiet, thinking. Blood had seeped through his bandage. Alara moved to change it, working with careful efficiency. "Why would I do this?" Carson asked. "Why would I risk going against him?" "Because he tried to kill you," Alara said. "Because he'll do it again if you give him the chance. And because maybe you're tired of being the kind of man who helps men like him." "You don't know anything about what kind of man I am." "No, but you get to choose what kind of man you become." Carson looked at her for a long moment, then at Caleb, then at the ceiling, like answers might be written there. "I'll do it," he said finally. "I'll testify. Tell the sheriff everything. But you need to understand something. Vance won't let this go. You humiliate him. You make him look weak. He'll burn this whole territory down to get revenge." "Let him try," Caleb said. 3 days later, they made it to town. Carson could ride if he was careful. They rigged a sling for his arm, bundled him against the cold, and put him on Greta. Caleb and Alara walked alongside, breaking trail through snow still deep enough to slow them. The ride took twice as long as it should have. By the time Redemption came into view, the sun was past its peak and sliding toward evening. The town looked different to Caleb now. Smaller, more fragile, like something that could be broken if you pushed hard enough. They tied Greta outside the sheriff's office. A few people stopped to stare. At Carson's obvious injury, at Alara walking openly beside Caleb, at the strange tableau they made. Let them stare. Let them talk. That was part of the plan. Sheriff Donnelly was at his desk, working through paperwork. He looked up when they entered, and his expression went carefully neutral. "Caleb, Miss—" He paused, clearly not sure what to call Ilara. "Vance," she said. "Ilara Vance, though I never took his name legally, never had the choice." Donnelly's eyes sharpened. He looked at Carson, at the sling, at the blood staining his coat. "This is going to be complicated, isn't it?" "Yes," Caleb said. They laid it all out. Carson went first, his testimony measured and detailed. How Vance had hired him, what he'd been asked to do, the threats, the intimidation, the final order to force his way onto Caleb's land and take Ilara by any means necessary, the bullet when he'd refused. Donnelly listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When Carson finished, he turned to Ilara. "Your turn." She told her story, all of it. The marriage that wasn't a marriage, the abuse that escalated over years, the 2 escape attempts and their brutal consequences, the final decision to risk death rather than go back. Her voice didn't shake, didn't break. She laid out the facts like evidence in a trial, cold and clear. When she finished, Donnelly sat back in his chair. "That's quite an accusation." "It's the truth," Ilara said. "Truth and proof are different things." "I've got proof." She pulled up her sleeve, showed him the scar tissue on her forearms. Old burns, deliberate patterns. These don't happen by accident, and Carson's bullet wound didn't happen by accident either. Mr. Vance could say you did that to yourself, that Carson was shot by someone else. He could, but he'd be lying. Donnelly looked at Caleb. "And where do you fit in all this?" "She needed help. I helped." "That simple?" "That's simple." "Nothing's that simple." "Sometimes it is." Donnelly stood, paced to the window, looked out at the street. His hand rested on his gun belt, fingers drumming a nervous pattern. "Here's the situation," he said without turning around. "Legally, Vance has a claim. He filed a missing person report. He's her husband on paper, whatever the reality was. If he demands I turn her over to him, I have to at least consider it." "You can't," Ilara started. "Let me finish." Donnelly turned back. "But if I have reason to believe she's in danger, if I have testimony suggesting abuse, if I have evidence of criminal conspiracy, then I have grounds to delay, to investigate, to keep her under protective custody while I sort through the mess." "How long can you delay?" Caleb asked. "Week, maybe 2 if I'm creative, but eventually this goes to a judge, and judges cost money." "Money Vance has and you don't. So we're just delaying the inevitable." "Maybe. Or maybe we use that time to build a case strong enough that no judge can ignore it." Donnelly sat back down, pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. "I need everything documented, every incident, every witness, every piece of evidence. We do this right, we do it thorough, and we hope it's enough." They spent the next 2 hours going through it all again. Donnelly wrote everything down in his careful script, asked questions, pressed for details. When they finished, he had 10 pages of testimony. "This is good," he said. "Better than I expected. Carson's testimony especially. That gives us criminal conspiracy. Attempted murder. That's serious." "Will it be enough?" Ilara asked. "I don't know, but it's a start." Donnelly stood, walked to a cabinet in the corner, pulled out a tin star. "Miss Vance, I'm deputizing you temporarily. Gives you legal protection under my authority. Anyone tries to take you by force, they're assaulting an officer of the law. That changes the math." He pinned the star to her coat. It looked absurd there, this symbol of authority on a woman who'd been running for her life weeks ago. But it also looked right. "What about me?" Carson asked. "You're under protective custody, medical treatment. You stay in town, you stay visible, and you stay alive to testify when this goes to trial." "If it goes to trial." "When it goes to trial," Donnelly corrected. "I'm not letting this go. Vance wants to play games with the law. He's going to learn the law has teeth." They left the sheriff's office as the sun touched the horizon. The temperature was dropping fast, and Caleb wanted to be well away from town before full dark. But word had spread. People were gathering on the street, watching. Mercer stood outside his store. Mrs. Yao on the boarding house steps. Miller and his son across the street. looking nervous. And at the end of the street, backlit by the dying sun, stood Vance. He was exactly as Caleb remembered, well-dressed, composed, the picture of civilized concern, but his eyes were cold, calculating. They locked gazes across the distance. Vance smiled, tipped his hat, a gesture that said, "I see you. I know what you're doing, and it won't matter." Caleb stared back, not giving an inch. Then Alara stepped forward, stood beside Caleb, the deputy star visible on her coat. Vance's smile faltered, just for a second, but long enough to see. "Let's go," Alara said quietly. They walked to where Greta waited, keeping their movements calm and deliberate. Caleb helped Alara up, then swung up behind her. Carson was staying in town under Donnelly's protection. As they rode out, Caleb felt eyes on his back, felt the weight of what they'd just done settling in. They'd drawn a line in the snow, made it official. There was no going back now. "You okay?" he asked Alara. "No." Her voice was tight. "But I will be." The ride back to the cabin was quiet. They pushed hard, wanting to put distance between themselves and town. The sky went from gold to purple to black, stars appearing one by one. When they finally reached the cabin, both of them were exhausted. They tended to Greta, made sure she had food and water, then stumbled inside. Caleb built up the fire while Alara heated food. They ate standing up, too tired to sit properly. "What happens now?" she asked. "We wait. Donnelly does his investigation, builds the case. And if Vance doesn't wait? Then we deal with it." She touched the deputy star on her coat. "This feels strange. Good strange or bad strange?" "Both. Like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." "You're not pretending. You're standing up. There's a difference." She looked at him across the small cabin. "What if this doesn't work? What if he wins anyway?" "Then we tried. That's more than most people do." "Is it enough?" "It has to be." But neither of them was convinced. That night, they took turns keeping watch again. Old habits from the storm, but this time the threat wasn't weather. It was human, more dangerous. Around midnight, during Caleb's watch, he heard horses. 3 riders, coming fast up the valley. He woke Alara with a hand over her mouth, the signal they'd agreed on. She came awake instantly, already reaching for the rifle. They moved to positions, Caleb at the window, Alara by the door, both armed, both ready. The riders stopped 50 yards out, close enough to be seen in the moonlight, far enough to avoid immediate gunfire. "Rourke!" the voice carried across the snow. "We need to talk." Caleb recognized it. "Miller." "Talk from there," he shouted back. "The sheriff wants you, both of you, back in town, now." "Why?" "Judge came in early. Emergency session. Vance pushed it through." Caleb's blood went cold. "When?" "Sun up. You don't show. You lose by default." "That's not how it works." "It is when you've got money and influence. Sheriff says get to town, says it's your only chance." The riders turned and thundered back the way they'd come, disappearing into the darkness. Caleb and Alara looked at each other. "It's a trap," she said. "Maybe. Probably." "Probably," he agreed. "But if we don't go, we lose anyway. And if we do go, we might die." "Might?" She laughed, bitter and sharp. "Those are terrible odds. Best we've got." They spent the rest of the night preparing, loaded weapons, packed supplies, made plans for things to go wrong in 6 different ways. When dawn broke gray and cold, they were ready. Caleb saddled Greta, checked her hoof, healing well, strong enough for the trip. Alara wore the deputy star openly now, a target and a shield at the same time. "Last chance to run," Caleb said. "Where would I go?" "Anywhere. Mountains. Next territory. Somewhere he can't find you." "He'd find me. Eventually. Men like him always do." She checked her rifle one more time. "Better to face it now. On our terms." "These aren't our terms." "Close enough." They rode out as the sun cleared the horizon, painting the snow gold and pink. Beautiful morning, the kind that made you think the world was good and safe. They both knew better. The ride to town felt longer than before. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every sound could be danger. but nothing came. That worried Caleb more than an ambush would have. Redemption was crowded when they arrived. More people than Caleb had ever seen in town. Word had spread. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was an event. The makeshift courthouse, really just the meeting hall above Mercer's store, was packed. Every bench filled, people standing along the walls. The judge sat behind a table that usually held Sunday socials, looking annoyed at being there. Vance sat on one side with two lawyers Caleb had never seen before. Expensive suits, city men. Donnelly waved them to the other side. Carson sat there too, arm still in a sling. "This is bad," Donnelly muttered as they sat down. "Judge Adams owes favors to people who know Vance. This was supposed to take weeks. Instead, we've got hours." "Can we win?" Alara asked. "Honestly, I don't know." The judge banged his gavel. The room went quiet. "This is a hearing to determine the legal status of one Alara Vance, claimed wife of Mr. Edmund Vance, present in this courtroom." Judge Adams looked bored already. "Mr. Vance claims his wife is being held against her will. The defendant claims she left of her own free will due to abuse. We're here to sort through this mess. Mr. Vance, your opening statement." One of Vance's lawyers stood. Tall, gray-haired, voice like silk over steel. "Your Honor, this is a simple case of a confused woman being manipulated by a stranger with unclear motives. My client's wife disappeared weeks ago during a mental episode. She is not well. She needs medical care and the protection of her lawful husband, not the isolation and potential danger of—" "She's not confused," Alara stood up. "I'm right here. I can speak for myself." The gavel banged. "You'll get your turn, miss. Sit down." "It's not miss. I'm not his wife. I never agreed." "Sit down or I'll have you removed." Caleb pulled her back into her seat. She was shaking, fists clenched. The lawyer continued, smooth and practiced, painting a picture of a sick woman and a worried husband. He had documents, marriage certificate, property deeds, letters from doctors saying Alara was prone to hysteria. All lies. All legal. When he finished, Donnelly stood. "Your Honor, with respect, we have testimony from a witness who worked for Mr. Vance. Testimony that contradicts everything you just heard. Call your witness." Carson stood, moved to the front. He told his story again. The threats, the violence, the bullet. He was good, steady, believable. But Vance's lawyers tore into him. Criminal record from years ago. History of violence. Admitted to taking money to intimidate people. By the time they were done, Carson looked like exactly what Vance's lawyers claimed. A hired thug trying to save himself. Then Alara testified. Showed her scars, told her story. Laid it all out in clear, simple truth. And Vance's lawyers made her sound like a woman scorned, vindictive, possibly delusional. They had statements from neighbors saying they'd never seen abuse, from staff saying Vance was a gentleman, all paid for, all rehearsed. It went on for hours, back and forth, truth and lies mixing until you couldn't tell which was which. Finally, Judge Adams called a recess. "I'll render my decision in 1 hour." The courtroom emptied into the street. Caleb found a quiet corner with Alara and Donnelly. "We're losing," Alara said flatly. "We don't know that," Donnelly said, but his face said otherwise. "I can see it. The judge believes him. Or he's been paid to believe him. Either way, we're losing." "There's still time." "For what? More testimony? More evidence? None of it matters if he's already made up his mind." She was right. Caleb could feel it too. The outcome was predetermined. They were just going through the motions. "Then we leave," he said. "Right now. Get on Greta and ride. They can't stop us if we move fast." "They can chase us. Let them try." "Caleb, I'm serious. This is rigged. You said it yourself. So we don't play their game. We make our own." Alara looked at him, at Donnelly, at the town square filling back up with people coming to see the verdict. "No," she said quietly. "What?" "No, I'm not running anymore. If he wins, he wins. But he wins because they chose him, not because I gave up. That's pride talking. Maybe. But it's my pride. My choice." Before Caleb could argue, someone screamed. Everyone turned. A man was stumbling up the street covered in blood. Not his blood. Too much. Too fresh. He collapsed in the snow. Donnelly ran over, Caleb right behind him. "What happened?" The man gasped, trying to find words. Riders, coming from the north, armed. How many? 5, maybe 6. They said they're coming for the woman, coming to take what's theirs. Caleb's blood ran cold. Vance's reinforcements. They'd arrived early, and they were coming now. The town square erupted into chaos. People scattered, running for cover. Women grabbed children. Men reached for whatever weapons they had. The wounded man kept repeating the same words. Armed riders, coming fast, minutes away. Donnelly moved first, years of training kicking in. Everyone inside, now! Mercer, bar your doors. Mrs. Yao, get people into the cellar. Caleb grabbed Alar's arm. We need to move. Where? Good question. The courthouse was a trap. 2nd floor, only one staircase. The street was exposed. Every building had too many windows, too many angles. The church, Carson said, appearing beside them. Despite his injury, he held a rifle. Stone walls. Limited access. Defensible. It was the best option they had. They ran. Caleb, Alara, Donnelly, Carson, and a handful of men brave enough or stupid enough to fight. The church sat at the edge of town, small but solid, built by pioneers who'd known about making things last. Inside, Caleb assessed their position. Heavy wooden door, narrow windows, thick walls. Not perfect, but better than being caught in the open. How many guns do we have? Donnelly asked. Quick count, 7 rifles, 2 shotguns, 3 pistols. Enough ammunition if they were careful. Not enough, one of the townsmen said. His name was Porter, young, scared. Not against 6 trained killers. We don't need to win, Caleb said. We just need to survive long enough for them to realize it's not worth it. You think they'll just leave? No, but I think they're being paid to do a job, not die for one. Make it expensive enough, they'll reconsider their employment. It was thin logic, but it was all they had. Caleb positioned people at windows, 1 per window, with others ready to rotate. He put Alara in the back corner, most protected position, despite her protests. I can shoot, she said. I know, but if they get through us, you're the last line, and you need to stay alive to make this mean something. She understood. Hated it, but understood. Minutes stretched. The town had gone silent outside, waiting. Then they heard it. Hoofbeats. 6 horses, moving slow and deliberate up the main street. Caleb moved to the window, peered through the gap in the shutters. 6 men, heavily armed. They wore dark coats, faces hard and professional. These weren't local muscle like Miller. These were exactly what Carson had said, professionals. They stopped in the middle of the street. The lead rider dismounted, tall, lean, face scarred from old battles. He surveyed the town with the calm assessment of someone who'd done this before. We're looking for Alara Vance, he called out. Wife of Edmund Vance. Send her out and nobody gets hurt. Silence. We know she's here. We know she's being held against her will. We're here to bring her home to her husband, who misses her very much. The lies came smooth and practiced. Last chance, the man called. Send her out, or we come get her. Donnelly leaned out a window. This is Sheriff Donnelly. You're making threats against a deputy of this town. Turn around and leave or face legal consequences. The lead man laughed. Actually laughed. Legal consequences, friend. We are the legal consequences. We've got papers signed by a judge saying that woman belongs to Edmund Vance. You're interfering with a lawful retrieval. Show me the papers. Don't have them on me, but Vance does. He's in the courthouse right now. Go ask him. It was clever. Split their forces. Make them doubt. We're not giving her up, Caleb shouted. The lead man's eyes found the church, found Caleb in the window. And who are you? The man who says no. Brave, stupid, but brave. The man remounted his horse. Boys, looks like we're doing this the hard way. They spread out, professional, practiced. 3 took positions covering the church. 3 moved toward it using buildings for cover. Here they come, Caleb said quietly. The first shot cracked out. Not from the church, from Mercer's store. One of the townspeople who'd armed themselves. The bullet missed. But it started the dance. Return fire shattered Mercer's window. The shooting became general, scattered, chaotic, bullets flying from a dozen directions. Caleb fired carefully, measured, He wasn't trying to kill anyone, just make them think twice about advancing. Beside him, Carson worked his rifle one-handed, using the window frame for support. Despite his injury, he was accurate, professional. The attackers were good. They moved in pairs, covering each other, using every bit of available cover. Military training, real training. One of them made it to the church door, started trying to force it. Caleb couldn't get an angle on him from the window. "I've got him," Alara said. She moved to a side window, the one with a narrow view of the door. Raised her rifle, breathed out slow, the way Caleb had taught her. Fired. The bullet punched through the door, through the man's shoulder. He went down screaming, rolled away, dragged himself behind cover. "One down," she said, voice shaking but steady. The attack intensified. They were angry now. Someone had hurt one of their own. Bullets hammered the church walls. Stone chips flew. One of the townsmen, Porter, took a round in the leg, went down hard, cursing. "We can't hold this," someone shouted. "We have to!" Donnelly fired, reloaded, fired again. Caleb's mind raced through options. They were pinned, outnumbered, running low on ammunition. The attackers would eventually just burn them out or wait for dark and rush the door. Then he heard new sounds. More horses. Coming from the south. Reinforcements for Vance? Or something else? Through the smoke and chaos, Caleb saw riders flooding into town. 10, 15, 20. Men and women both, carrying rifles and shotguns and whatever else they had. Homesteaders. Ranchers. People from the territory who'd heard what was happening and decided they'd had enough. Mrs. Yao was with them, riding like she'd been born on horseback. So was Mercer. Miller and his son. People Caleb barely knew, but who knew the story, who'd chosen a side. The attackers saw them too. Their professional calm cracked. This wasn't the job they'd signed up for. "Fall back," their leader shouted. "Regroup!" They retreated toward their horses, still firing, still dangerous but no longer pressing the attack. The homesteaders didn't chase them, just formed a line, weapons ready, making it clear this town was defended now. The lead attacker made it to his horse, helped his wounded man up, looked back at the church one more time. "This isn't over," he shouted. Then they rode, fast, north out of town, disappearing into the snow. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breathing and the moans of the wounded Porter. Caleb lowered his rifle, hands shaking with adrenaline. "Everyone okay?" Donnelly called out. General affirmatives. Porter was hurt, but alive. A few others had minor wounds, but they'd actually held. The homesteaders stayed mounted, watching, making sure the attackers were really gone. Mrs. Yao rode up to the church, looked in through the shattered window. "You folks all right in there?" "We're alive," Caleb said. "Good, because we're not done yet." She gestured toward the courthouse. "Vance is still in there, and he's got the judge with him." Caleb looked at Ilara. She was pale but determined, the rifle still in her hands. "Time to finish this," she said. They walked back to the courthouse together. All of them, armed, angry, done with games. The judge was still at his table when they entered, but he looked significantly less bored now. Vance sat with his lawyers, face calm, but Caleb could see calculation in his eyes, measuring, planning his next move. "Your Honor," Donnelly said, "I think we need to reconsider this hearing." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that Mr. Vance just sent armed men to kidnap a woman from my protection. That's witness intimidation at minimum, conspiracy to commit violence, attempted kidnapping." "That's a serious accusation," Judge Adams said carefully. "It's the truth," Carson said, stepping forward. "I can identify 2 of those men. They work for an organization Vance uses regularly. I can provide names, dates, previous jobs." One of Vance's lawyers stood. "This is hearsay and speculation." "I saw the papers they were carrying," Mrs. Yao interrupted. She'd followed them into the courthouse. "One of them dropped it when he was shooting up my property. Signed orders from Mr. Vance, authorizing force if necessary." She slapped a blood-stained document on the judge's table. Judge Adams read it. His face went gray. "Mr. Vance," he said slowly, "do you want to explain this?" Vance stood. Vance smoothed his coat. When he spoke, his voice was still calm, still reasonable. "Your Honor, I was desperate. My wife has been gone for weeks. I was told she was being held against her will. I took measures that perhaps exceeded legal bounds, but surely you can understand a husband's concern. No. Everyone turned. Alara had spoken. She stepped forward, past Caleb, past Donnelly, until she stood directly in front of Vance. They were the same height, eye to eye. "I am not your wife," she said, voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "I was never your wife. I was your property, your possession, something you bought from a desperate man and kept through fear and violence. Alara, please, don't use that voice, that gentle, concerned voice you use when people are watching. I know what you are when the doors close. I know what you're capable of." She turned to face the judge, the whole courtroom. "I lived in his house for 6 years. 6 years of being told I was broken, crazy, wrong. 6 years of being hit when I spoke out of turn, locked in rooms when I disagreed, told that I was lucky anyone would want me at all." Her voice didn't shake, didn't break. "I tried to leave twice. Both times he found me. Both times he hurt me in ways that didn't show. And both times he told everyone I was sick, confused, that I needed his help." She showed her scars again. The burns, the marks. "These aren't accidents, these are control. This is what it looks like when someone treats another person like an object." She turned back to Vance. "You told me I was nothing without you, that I'd die alone in the snow if I left. You were almost right. I almost did die. But I didn't. And you know what I found when I survived?" "What?" Vance's voice was tight now, the mask slipping. "I found out I was stronger than you ever let me believe. I found out I could work, could think, could make choices, could be a whole person instead of whatever broken thing you needed me to be." She stepped closer. "You want me back because you can't stand losing, can't stand being wrong, can't stand that something you owned escaped. But I'm not coming back. Not now. Not ever. You can buy judges and hire guns and tell whatever lies you want. I'm still not coming back." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Vance stared at her. Something ugly moved behind his eyes. "You're nothing," he said quietly. "Without me, you're nothing. Maybe, but I'd rather be nothing and free than something and yours." Judge Adams cleared his throat. "I think I've heard enough." He stood gathering his papers. "Based on the testimony presented, the evidence of violence, and the attempted intimidation of witnesses, I'm ruling in favor of the defendant. The marriage is dissolved on grounds of abuse and coercion. Mr. Vance, you are to have no contact with Miss—" He paused, looked at Alara. "What name do you want to use?" "Just Alara. That's enough." "Miss Alara, then. Mr. Vance is to have no contact with you. If he violates this order, he will face criminal charges. This hearing is concluded." The gavel came down. For a moment, nobody moved. The weight of what had just happened settled over the room. Then Vance turned and walked out. No protests. No arguments. Just left. His lawyers scrambling to follow. But at the door, he looked back one last time. At Alara. At Caleb. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is," Caleb replied. Vance left. The courtroom emptied slowly. People came up to Alara, shaking her hand, offering quiet support. She accepted it all with grace, though Caleb could see the exhaustion in her eyes. When everyone had finally gone, it was just the two of them standing in the empty room. "We won," Alara said, like she couldn't quite believe it. "We won. What happens now? Now we go home, fix the roof, plant a garden, live. Just live. Just live." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she took off the deputy's star, set it on the judge's table. "I don't need this anymore." "No, you don't." They walked outside together. The sun was setting, painting the snow gold and pink. The same beautiful light as that morning, but everything was different now. The homesteaders were still there, standing in quiet groups talking. When Caleb and Alara emerged, they turned, watched. Then Mrs. Yao started clapping, slow at first. Then others joined, until the whole street was applauding, not loudly, not dramatically, just steady, solid acknowledgement. Alara's eyes filled. She didn't let the tears fall, but they were there. "Come on," Caleb said gently. "Let's go home."
The ride back to the cabin was quiet, peaceful. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm passes, when the world is clean and new and full of possibility. When they reached the valley, Caleb helped Alara down from Greta, tended to the horse, then they went inside together. The cabin was cold. They'd left in such a hurry that morning. Caleb built up the fire while Alara lit the lamps. Domestic tasks, normal tasks, the kind that fill a life when you're not running for it. "Caleb," Alara said after a while. "Yeah? What do we do now, really?" He thought about it, about the question under the question. "I don't know," he said honestly. "We figure it out as we go. Can I stay here with you? Do you want to?" "Yes, if you'll have me." He looked at her across the small cabin. This woman who'd shown up dying in his wagon, who'd learned to survive, to fight, to stand up for herself, who'd changed everything just by being there. "Yeah," he said. "I'll have you." She smiled. Actually smiled. Not the almost smile. The real thing. "Good. Because I'm not much for living alone anymore." Me neither, it turns out. They ate dinner together. Talked about plans. Real plans, not survival plans. What to plant in the garden. Whether to expand the cabin. How to fix the barn roof before next winter. Small things. Normal things. Later, as the fire burned down and the night settled in, they sat in comfortable silence. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For everything. For saving me. For fighting for me. For..." She paused. "For seeing me as a person when everyone else saw me as a problem. You were never a problem. Wasn't I?" "No. You were a person who needed help. There's a difference." She was quiet for a moment, then, "I think I'm going to stay Alara. Just Alara. No last name. Start fresh." "Just Alara. I like it." "And you're just Caleb?" "Just Caleb works." She laughed, soft and genuine. Two people with no last names, living in the middle of nowhere, trying to figure out how to be normal. Normal's overrated anyway. True. The spring came slow but certain. Snow melted. Grass pushed through. The valley transformed from white to brown to green. They planted the garden together. Rows of vegetables, herbs, even flowers at Alara's insistence. She said the cabin needed beauty, not just function. Caleb fixed the barn roof, expanded the chicken coop. Beatrice and her companions were producing eggs regularly now, and Alara had started talking about getting more chickens. Maybe a cow. The town accepted them. Slowly. People weren't quick to warm up out here, but Alara's testimony had shifted something. She became known as the woman who stood up, who fought back. Respect came with that. She started helping Mrs. Yao sometimes, working at the boarding house when they needed extra hands. Not because she needed the money, though it helped, but because she wanted to be part of something, wanted to contribute. Caleb taught her to read better, working through books in the evenings. She was smart, quick to learn, frustrated by gaps in her education but determined to fill them. One evening, about 2 months after the hearing, she looked up from a book. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "I've been thinking." "About?" "About what this is. Us. This." She gestured at the cabin, the life they'd built. "We never really talked about it." "We didn't need to." "Maybe we do now." He set down the wood he'd been carving, gave her his full attention. "Okay. Talk. I don't want to be alone anymore. And I don't think you do either. We work well together. We fit. But I need to know, is this just survival? Just two lonely people sharing space? Or is it something more? What do you want it to be?" "I want it to be real. I want this to be my home, not a place I'm staying until something better comes along. Home. With you." Caleb felt something settle in his chest, something that had been loose for years. "This is real," he said. "As real as anything I've ever had. And yeah, I want you here. Not as help. Not as company. As..." He struggled for words. "As my partner. As someone I'm building a life with." "Like a marriage?" "If you want, though we don't need papers to make it real." "No," she agreed. "We don't need papers." She came to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I was someone's wife once. It almost killed me.
I don't know if I can be that again. Then don't be. Be Alara. Be yourself. That's all I want. And if that's enough, it's more than enough. They sat like that as the fire burned low, neither moving, just being together in the quiet. Summer brought heat and work. They hauled water for the garden, harvested early crops, fixed things that broke. The routine of living, simple and hard and good. Greta healed completely, her hoofs strong again. The chickens multiplied. Alara had been right about needing more space. They built additional coops, laughing at how seriously Beatrice took her role as head hen. One afternoon, Sheriff Donnelly rode out to the cabin. Caleb saw him coming, met him outside. Alara joined them, wiping dirt from her hands. "Sheriff," Caleb said. "Problem?" "Not a problem. News." Donnelly dismounted, looking tired. "Vance is gone. Left the territory 3 weeks ago. Someone saw him boarding a train east. Haven't heard from him since." "He's really gone?" Alara asked. "Looks like it. Word is he's got legal troubles back where he came from. Some business deals went bad. People asking questions. Probably figured it was better to cut his losses here and deal with problems there." "So it's over?" "Looks like it. Thought you should know." Relief flooded Alara's face. "Thank you. For everything." "Just doing my job." Donnelly paused. "You two planning to stay out here?" "That's the plan," Caleb said. "Good. Town needs good people, even if they live 18 miles away." After Donnelly left, Alara stood looking at the valley for a long time. "It's really over," she said finally. "Yeah, it is. I thought I'd feel different, like something would change. And I don't. I already felt free, already felt safe." She turned to look at him. "He's been gone in all the ways that mattered for months now. Because you chose to be free, long before any judge said so. We chose, together." "Together," he agreed. Fall brought color to the valley, gold and red and orange painting the trees. They harvested the garden, preserved what they could, prepared for winter. This time, when the snow came, they were ready. More wood than they needed, more food, more supplies. They'd learned from the last storm. But winter was mild that year. A few storms, but nothing like the monster that had buried them. They spent long evenings reading, talking, planning for spring. Caleb told stories about his time in the war, about the daughter he'd lost, about the years of wandering that had led him here. Alara talked about her childhood, her mother's cooking, the small joys she'd held on to even in the darkest times. They learned each other slowly, not in big dramatic moments, but in the small ones, the way Alara hummed when she was content, the way Caleb's hands never stopped moving, always fixing something, the rhythm of their days together. One night, deep in winter, they lay in the darkness, listening to wind in the trees. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "I'm happy." "Is that strange?" "Why would it be strange?" "Because of everything. Because of where I came from, what I survived." She paused. "I feel like I should be broken, but I'm not. I'm happy." "You're allowed to be happy." "Are you?" He thought about it, about the guilt he'd carried for so long, about his daughter, his wife, the years he'd spent punishing himself. "Yeah," he said finally, "I think I am." "Good." When spring came again, they planted a bigger garden, built a proper fence, talked about maybe getting that cow Alara wanted. The cabin was too small now for everything they'd accumulated. Caleb started planning an addition, another room, maybe 2, space for the life they were building. One morning, working in the garden, Alara straightened up and looked at him. "This is enough, isn't it?" "What do you mean?" "This, us, this life. It's not grand, it's not easy, but it's enough." "Yeah, it's enough. I used to think I needed to be saved, rescued, taken somewhere better." She brushed dirt from her hands. "But I don't think that's how it works. I think you just find someone willing to stand with you while you save yourself." "Is that what I did?" "That's what we did, for each other." She was right. They'd saved each other, not through some grand gesture, but through small acts repeated daily. Trust, respect, partnership. "Come here," Caleb said. She came. He pulled her close, kissed her forehead, held her tight. "Thank you," he said, "for climbing into my wagon, for being crazy enough to survive, for staying. Thank you for pulling back the canvas." They stood like that for a long moment, two people who'd been broken finding wholeness in each other. Then Beatrice squawked indignantly from the chicken yard, and they both laughed, and the moment passed into the normalcy of their days. Years would pass. The cabin would grow. Maybe children would come, maybe not. Maybe they'd formalize their partnership with papers. Maybe they wouldn't. It didn't matter. What mattered was this. Two people who'd been lost had found each other in the wilderness, had built something real from nothing, had chosen each other every day, in small ways and large. The world outside kept turning. Towns grew. Territories became states. Time moved on. But in a small valley in Montana, in a cabin backed against pine trees, two people lived. Just lived. Together. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.